When Mr. Ellis disappeared, nobody seemed to notice at first. The old man had lived alone in the crumbling white house next door for as long as anyone could remember, a hunched figure with cloudy eyes, always puttering in his overgrown garden, or muttering to himself on his sagging front porch. Kids called him Creepy Ellis behind his back. Adults nodded politely when they passed. But nobody ever stopped to chat. Mr. Ellis was part of the scenery, odd, forgotten, harmless, until he was gone. It was the little things that caught Nathan's attention first. The mail piling up in the rusted box, the uncut grass swallowing the cracked walkway, the absence of light in the windows after sunset. At 14, Nathan wasn't exactly a detective, but he noticed stuff. Especially strange stuff. He mentioned it to his mother over dinner one night. "Maybe he's visiting family," she said, not looking up from her phone. Nathan snorted. "Mr. Ellis doesn't have family." His mom shrugged. "Maybe he needed a break. God knows I could use one." She laughed dryly, and that was the end of it, or it should have been. That night, Nathan heard the first whisper. He woke up to a soft, scratchy voice calling his name. "Nathan." The sound was faint, almost lost in the hiss of the wind outside. He sat up, heart hammering. The room was empty, silvered in moonlight. He pressed his ear to the window. There it was again, drifting across the space between his house and Mr. Ellis's abandoned porch. "Nathan, come here!" Nathan slammed the window shut. It had to be a dream, or maybe one of the neighborhood kids messing around. Yeah, that had to be it. Still, he slept with the covers pulled over his head. The next morning, he checked the porch. No footprints in the dust, no signs of life, just Mr. Ellis's battered rocking chair creaking slowly back and forth in the breeze, as if someone had just stood up and left. The whispering continued the next night and the night after, always between midnight and 1 a.m., always from the porch, always saying the same thing. "Nathan, come here." Nathan stopped telling his mom about it after the second time. She didn't believe him, said it was stress, school, video games messing with his brain. But he knew what he heard. He wasn't crazy. And somehow the whisper knew his name. One night, curiosity got the better of fear. He crept downstairs, slipping on sneakers and grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The digital clock on the stove blinked 12:17 a.m. Perfect ghost hunting hour, he thought grimly. He stepped outside. The air was thick with humidity, heavy and sour with the scent of rotting leaves. Across the lawn, Mr. Ellis's house loomed, a black silhouette against the faint orange glow of the streetlights. The porch was dark, still, except for the whisper. "Nathan, come here." Nathan swallowed hard. His legs moved without permission. He crossed the yard slowly, grass whispering against his ankles. Closer now, he could hear more than just the whisper. There were words under the words, fragmented, urgent, a warning or an invitation. His flashlight flickered as he reached the steps. The old boards groaned under his weight. He raised the beam of light and froze. There, sitting in the rocking chair, was Mr. Ellis. Sort of. His body was translucent, thin as mist. The rocking chair kept creaking. Though there was no wind, Mr. Ellis smiled at Nathan, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, too knowing, too sad. He lifted one skeletal finger and pointed downward, beneath the porch, into the dark. Nathan wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at him. But something else, a curiosity, stubbornness, maybe stupidity, rooted him in place. Slowly, he knelt down and peered into the gap under the porch. His flashlight wobbled in his sweaty hand. The beam caught on something, a glint of metal. No, not metal. A doorknob. Hidden under the porch, half buried in dirt and old roots, was a trapdoor. Nathan's heart pounded so loudly he was sure Mr. Ellis could hear it. Maybe he wanted him to hear it. The whisper came again, so close now it brushed the back of Nathan's neck. "Help me." Nathan grabbed the edge of the trapdoor and pulled. It groaned in protest, but lifted. A blast of cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of damp earth and something else, something old and sour. He hesitated, looked back. Mr. Ellis was gone. Only the rocking chair remained, creaking gently. Nathan took a deep breath and climbed down into the dark. Beneath the porch, a narrow dirt tunnel stretched into blackness. Wooden beams supported the low ceiling. Roots dangled like skeletal fingers. Nathan's flashlight flickered again, but stayed alive. Barely. The walls were close, pressing in on him. The air was thick and wet. Every step squelched in the mud, and the whispering grew louder, clearer. It wasn't just Mr. Ellis's voice anymore. It was dozens, hundreds, all calling his name, all beckoning. He should have turned back. He knew that, but some invisible hook had lodged itself in his chest, dragging him forward until he reached it, a second door. Much older than the trapdoor above, built of black wood, reinforced with iron bands, covered in strange, twisting symbols that hurt his eyes to look at. The doorknob was cold and slick, like it was alive. Nathan hesitated, hand hovering over the handle. The whispering was deafening now, a hurricane of voices. "Help us! Free us! Open it! Open it! Open it!" Something deep in Nathan screamed, "No!" But something else, older, deeper, more primal, said, "Yes!" He reached out. Fingers brushed the knob, and the door shuddered. Nathan's fingers closed around the doorknob. It pulsed beneath his hand. Not warm, not cold, but something worse. Alive. For one heart-stopping moment, the world around him seemed to tilt. The tunnel walls twisted, the mud under his sneakers shifted like breathing skin, and a sound, low, growling, almost mechanical, rumbled. Through the darkness. Still, Nathan held tight. He had come this far. He wasn't going to turn back now. With a deep breath, he twisted the knob. The door swung inward silently. No squeak, no scrape, just a smooth, oily movement that made Nathan's stomach churn. Beyond it, there was no tunnel, no dirt, no roots, just a stairwell spiraling down into blinding, sickly yellow light. Nathan hesitated on the threshold. The whispers were louder now, swirling around him in a dizzying storm. Some begged, some screamed, some simply chanted his name like a prayer. "Nathan! Nathan! Nathan!" He tightened his grip on the flashlight and stepped through. The door swung shut behind him with a heavy, final thunk. The staircase was narrow and steep. The walls were slick, covered in something thick and wet that smelled like iron and mildew. Nathan kept one hand on the wall to steady himself, feeling the unpleasant squelch with every step. Down and down he went, counting in his head to keep sane. 30 steps, 50, 80. By the 100th step he stopped counting. There was no end in sight, no breaks, no landings, just endless descent and the whispers. Always the whispers, growing louder with each step. Finally, the stairs spilled out into a vast, circular chamber. Nathan's flashlight beam barely scratched the darkness, but what he could see made his skin crawl. The room was lined with doors, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all different, some tall and thin, some short and wide, some painted in garish colors, others plain wood or rotting metal. Each door had a symbol carved above it, twisting, writhing shapes that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. And behind each door, something moved, something scratched, something whispered. Nathan took a shaky step forward. The ground here wasn't dirt, it was something else, pale and spongy, like walking on old mattresses soaked with water. The air buzzed with static electricity. The hairs on his arms stood on end. As he passed the doors, some of them rattled violently, as if whatever was behind them could sense him. Others remained eerily still, but the feeling was worse, like they were waiting, hunting, choosing. He had no idea where he was supposed to go. There were no signs, no maps, just the endless circle of doors. And then one door began to glow, soft and blue, like moonlight, different. From the sickly yellow light that filled the rest of the chamber, the symbol above this door was simpler than the others. A single, unbroken circle. It pulsed gently, almost like it was breathing. Nathan's heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct told him, this one. This was where Mr. Ellis had wanted him to go. This was why the whispering had started, why the trap door had been hidden, why the ghost had pointed. He approached the glowing door. The closer he got, the quieter the whispers became, until, standing before it, there was only silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against his eardrums until they popped. He reached out and touched the wood. It was warm, almost comforting. He pressed his forehead. Against it felt something stir on the other side, not anger, not hunger, hope. He turned the handle and stepped through. He was back outside, or so it seemed at first. He stood in Mr. Ellis's backyard. The garden was wild with waist-high weeds and dead trees. The house itself loomed grey and skeletal against a blood-red sky. Something was wrong with the world, the colours too sharp, the angles too steep, the shadows too deep. It was like a twisted mirror of reality, a dream or a nightmare. Nathan spun around. The door he had come through was gone. No walls, no frame, just open air. The whispering had returned. But it was different. Now more like crying. Soft, broken sobs carried by the wind. Nathan, the voice was close. He turned. There, sitting in the dirt, was Mr. Ellis, but not the translucent ghost from the porch. This Ellis was solid, hunched and shivering, his clothes torn, his face bruised and hollow. He looked up at Nathan with bloodshot eyes. "You shouldn't have come." Nathan's mouth was dry as sandpaper. "I heard you calling me," he said hoarsely. Mr. Ellis shook his head violently. "No, not me. Never me." He pointed to the house. "They called you. They want you." Nathan followed his gaze. The house windows stared back at him like empty eyes. The front door creaked open, revealing only blackness. Shapes moved inside, long, spindly things that twitched and writhed like insects, and from within, a chorus of voices cried out, "Nathan, come inside. We've been waiting. Come home." Nathan stumbled back. The ground quaked beneath him. Cracks split open the dirt, oozing black, tar-like liquid. The trees twisted, their branches reaching for him like skeletal fingers. He grabbed Mr. Ellis's arm. "Come with me," he said desperately. Mr. Ellis shook his head. Tears streamed down his sunken cheeks. "I can't leave," he whispered. "They have me." The shapes at the house's threshold began to pour out, forming long, snaking tendrils that slithered toward Nathan across the grass. He had to make a choice. Now run and leave Mr. Ellis behind, or fight and risk being trapped forever in this nightmare version of his world. Nathan gritted his teeth. He wasn't going to abandon him. And not like everyone else had, not like the town had. He dragged Mr. Ellis to his feet. The old man was lighter than he looked, almost weightless. Together, they stumbled toward the far fence, away from the house, away from the reaching shadows. But the world was shifting under them. The ground broke apart, the sky cracked like shattered glass, and through the cracks something was watching, a single, enormous eye, lidless, unblinking, full of ancient hunger. Nathan forced himself to look away, forced himself to run faster. The whispering changed, growing frantic. "Don't leave! Don't leave! Stay! Stay with us!" Tendrils brushed his ankles, cold and sticky. He kicked free, heart hammering. They were almost to the fence, almost free. With a final burst of strength, Nathan shoved Mr. Ellis over the rotting wood and scrambled after him. The second he touched the ground on the other side, the world snapped like a rubber band stretched too far. There was a sound like tearing paper, and then silence. Real silence. Nathan gasped for air, blinking against the sudden, normal darkness of Mr. Ellis's real backyard. The sky was dark, but normal. The house stood silent. No blood-red skies, no reaching shadows, no enormous eyes, just the creaking of old wood and the chirp of crickets. Mr. Ellis lay on the ground beside him, breathing heavily. Solid, real, alive. Nathan helped him sit. Up the old man gripped his hand tight, eyes wide with terror. "You have to bury it," Ellis gasped. "The trap door, the doors beneath, before they find another way through." Nathan nodded shakily. He understood now. The whispering would never truly stop, not unless he sealed the gateway himself. Tomorrow he would do it, dig it up, salt the earth, burn the remains, whatever it took. But for tonight, he sat beside Mr. Ellis under the real stars, feeling the slow, steady beat of his heart. Alive, still alive. The next morning, Nathan barely touched his cereal. It sat in the bowl, turning soggy, as he stared out the kitchen window toward Mr. Ellis's house. The porch sagged lower than he remembered. The rocking chair was still. No whispers, no movement, but the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like holding your breath, waiting. His mother bustled around the kitchen, oblivious. She ranted about work, bills, the broken air conditioner. Nathan nodded automatically, tuning her out. Every nerve was tuned toward the trapdoor under Mr. Ellis's porch, the secret door he knew he had to bury, seal, destroy before it opened again. He waited until afternoon, when the sun was high and people were inside, hiding from the heat. He gathered supplies, a rusty shovel from the garage, a sack of salt from the kitchen, a battered can of lighter fluid, an old Zippo his dad had left behind years ago. He stuffed them all into his backpack. Then, without a word, to his mum, he slipped across the yard and vaulted the fence into Mr. Ellis's backyard. The grass was taller here, wilder, as if no one had dared to mow it for years. Nathan pushed through. Heart hammering, the porch loomed above him, sagging like a tired old man. The trapdoor, hidden beneath the porch beams, waited, just like last night. Nathan dropped to his knees and began digging. At first it was just dirt, dry, powdery soil that puffed into his nose and eyes, but as he dug deeper the soil grew darker, wetter, stinking of rot. The shovel struck something hard. Wood. He brushed it clean with shaking fingers. The trap door, still there, still whole, still pulsing faintly under his touch, like a heartbeat. He grabbed the salt and began pouring it around the edges, thick white lines, circles and crosses like he'd seen in horror movies. He doused the trapdoor with lighter fluid, coughing at the sharp chemical stink. Then he flicked the Zippo open. Flame bloomed, small but fierce. He hesitated, the flame trembling in his hand. Was this enough? Could a little fire stop whatever ancient horror lived beneath? He didn't have time to wonder, because the trapdoor shuddered. The wood buckled outward, like something was slamming against it from below. The dirt trembled under his knees. A crack split the center of the trapdoor, jagged and black. From the crack a sound seeped out, not a whisper this time, a growl, low, hungry. Nathan didn't think. He threw the lit Zippo onto the trapdoor. Flames raced across the lighter fluid, roaring to life. The crackling fire consumed the wood in seconds, thick black smoke billowing upward. Nathan stumbled back, coughing. The growl turned into a shriek, high-pitched and furious, like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. The ground split wider. Something pushed against the remains of the trapdoor, something large, something wrong. Through the flames, Nathan saw it, a massive black hand, twisted, fingers too long, claws curved like sickles. The hand clawed at the earth, dragging itself upward. He backed away, heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The fire licked at the creature's flesh. It sizzled, smoked, but it didn't stop. It kept coming. Suddenly, hands grabbed him from behind. He screamed until he turned and saw Mr. Ellis, pale and wild-eyed, dragging him away from the burning pit. "Run, boy!" Ellis shouted. Nathan didn't argue. Together they fled across the backyard. The earth buckled behind them, cracking and splintering. Black smoke poured into the sky, blotting out the sun. Ash rained down like snow. The fire had spread. To the porch, the dry wood igniting like paper. Mr. Ellis stumbled. Coughing violently, Nathan caught him under the arms and pulled him along. They made it to Nathan's yard, just as the porch collapsed entirely. The ground under Mr. Ellis's house gave a final, shuddering heave. And then, silence. Nathan and Mr. Ellis collapsed behind Nathan's garage, panting. For a long time, neither spoke. They just watched as the black smoke twisted into the sky, spiraling higher and higher. Finally, Mr. Ellis rasped, "It's not over." Nathan looked at him, throat dry. "What do you mean?" Ellis closed his eyes, face grey with exhaustion. "You burned the door," he said. "But the house—" He coughed violently, blood speckling his lips. The house was the real gate. Nathan stared, in horror at the smouldering ruins next door. The house, the entire building, had been a doorway all along, a bridge between their world and ours. And now, with the trapdoor gone, the house broken, the doorway was wide open. The ground trembled faintly. Nathan felt it through his palms, a low, steady vibration, like something massive was moving, beneath them, beneath the entire neighborhood. The whispering returned, faint at first, almost tender. "Nathan, you can't. Leave us. You belong here now." Nathan squeezed his eyes shut. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The trap door was just a lock. The house was the door. And now, both were broken. Somewhere deep beneath the earth, something vast and ancient was waking up, hungry, waiting, watching. Nathan opened his eyes, looked at Mr. Ellis, whose breathing was shallow and ragged, looked at the burning ruins of the house, at the neighborhood, quiet and unaware. He tightened his fists. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to hide. If the doorway was open, if the monsters were coming, he would be ready. Tomorrow he would warn the others. Tomorrow he would fight. But tonight he sat beside Mr. Ellis under the flickering sky, listening to the soft whispers riding the smoke, knowing this was only the beginning. The next morning, Nathan woke to a town that didn't know it was doomed. The birds chirped like nothing had happened. Kids biked down the street, laughing. Mrs. Cartwright watered her petunias. The ruins of Mr. Ellis's house still smoked faintly, yellow tape strung around the property like a feeble spiderweb. The news crews had come and gone, buzzing like flies. The official word was gas, leak, faulty old pipes, nothing strange to see here. Nathan stood at the edge of his driveway, backpack slung over his shoulder, staring at the ruins. He could still feel it, the vibration under his feet, the hum of something massive and hidden, slowly rising, the whispering softer during the day, but never fully gone, as if the fire hadn't burned the evil out, just woken it up. He gripped the straps of his backpack tighter and crossed the street. It was time to get help. Real help. He couldn't do this alone. First stop, Kyle and Mara, his two best friends since third grade. If anyone would believe him, it would be them. Kyle was shooting hoops in his driveway when Nathan arrived. Mara sat nearby on the curb, thumbing through her phone. They both looked up as Nathan jogged toward them, sweaty and pale. Kyle caught the ball and tucked it under one arm, frowning. "Dude," he said, "you look like crap." "Thanks," Nathan panted. "Listen, I need your help. Both of you." Mara arched an eyebrow. "Is this about the fire? Your weirdo neighbor?" Nathan shook his head frantically. "It's bigger than that. Way bigger." He glanced around, then dropped his voice. "There's something under the neighborhood. Something old. Something evil." Mara snorted. "Wow, Somebody's been hitting the horror movies a little too hard. Kyle looked a little more serious. He wiped sweat from his forehead. What do you mean? Nathan told them everything. The trapdoor, the underground doors, the monstrous hand clawing up from the earth, the whispers, Mr. Ellis. All of it. When he finished, he was out of breath. Mara laughed, a short, sharp sound. Are you serious right now? Nathan stared at her. Did you not hear me? Something is waking up down there. The house, Mr. Ellis's house. It was a gate, and now it's broken wide open. Kyle looked uncomfortable. He bounced the basketball slowly. Against the ground. Look, man, I'm not saying you're lying, he said. But maybe you're just stressed. After everything. I mean, a gas explosion is pretty traumatic. Nathan felt cold all over. They didn't believe him. They thought he was crazy, just like everyone thought about Mr. Ellis. You have to help me, Nathan said desperately. Tonight, we have to dig. We have to find where it's coming from before it gets out. Mara stood up, brushing dust off her shorts. I've got better things to do than hunt imaginary monsters, she said. She flicked her ponytail over her shoulder and walked back toward her house. Kyle hesitated. For a moment, Nathan thought maybe, just maybe, his friend would side with him, but then Kyle sighed and followed Mara, dribbling the basketball lazily. Get some sleep, man, he said over his shoulder. You'll feel better in the morning. Nathan stood alone in the middle of the street, fists clenched at his sides. The whispering grew louder in his ears, swirling around him like cold wind. They don't believe you, Nathan. They never will. You are alone. He turned and ran. Next stop, the sheriff. Sheriff Hartwell was an old man with a beer belly and a walrus mustache. He'd been sheriff since before Nathan was born. He'd known Mr. Ellis. He had to know something was wrong. Nathan burst into the sheriff's office, nearly tripping over the welcome mat. The place was empty, except for Hartwell himself, lounging behind the desk, reading a battered paperback. He looked up, squinting. Nathan, you okay, son? Nathan rushed forward. Sheriff, listen, you have to help. There's something under the town. It's not safe. The fire wasn't an accident. The house was a gate. Hartwell raised a hand. Slow down. Breathe. Nathan gulped air. They're coming, he said hoarsely. From underground, we have to do something. The sheriff sighed, closed his book, sat up straighter. You been sleeping, son. Nathan shook his head violently. No time, you have to believe me. I know you and Mr. Ellis were close, Hartwell said gently, and I know losing him must be hard. I didn't lose him, Nathan snapped. He's alive. He's the one who told me about the doors. Hartwell's eyes softened with pity. He stood and came around the desk, placing a heavy hand on Nathan's shoulder. Listen to me, he said. There's nothing under this town but dirt and pipes. No monsters, no ghosts. Nathan shook him off. You're wrong, he whispered. Please, just come see, I'll show you. Hartwell's mouth tightened. You need rest, maybe a doctor. Nathan backed away, his heart sank. The sheriff wouldn't help him. No one would. As he turned to leave, Hartwell called after him. If you cause any more trouble, son, I'll have to call your mama. Nathan didn't answer. He slammed the door behind him. The bell over the door jangled, mockingly cheerful. He walked back through town in a daze. The sun was setting now, painting the sky blood red. The shadows grew long, twisting, stretching. The cracks in the sidewalk seemed deeper. The air buzzed. Faintly, like static, the whispers followed him. He realized, with a sick drop of his stomach, that the vibrations were stronger now. The ground shivered under his sneakers, almost too faint to notice. Almost. A sound split the air. Not a whisper. A scream. High. Terrified. From the far end of the street, Nathan spun toward it. A woman stumbled out of her house. Clawing at the air, behind her the earth split open, not a crack this time, a full chasm. Something black and slick and writhing poured out of it. Long arms, clawed hands, eyeless faces. The monsters had arrived, and no one was ready. Nathan ran toward the woman, grabbing her arm. "Run!" he screamed. Together, they fled down the street as neighbors poured out of their houses gaping. The ground buckled, sidewalks crumbled, trees ripped out of the earth like rotten teeth. From every split in the earth, the creatures slithered, tall, thin, horrifyingly fast. Their mouths gaped open in silent wails. Their bodies shimmered like oil in the dying light. The sheriff barreled out of his office, gun drawn. He fired 3 shots into the nearest creature. The bullets passed through it like smoke. Hartwell stood frozen for 1 fatal second. Then the creature reached him, its clawed hand wrapped around his head. There was a sickening crack. The sheriff dropped like a stone. Nathan choked on bile. He grabbed the woman's hand tighter and pulled her toward the only safe place he could think of. His house. He didn't know if it would hold. He didn't know if anywhere would hold, but he had to try. The monsters were spreading out now, fanning through the town, snuffing out lights, silencing screams. The sky above twisted into a swirling black vortex, thick with smoke and ash. The last rays of the sun disappeared. The world plunged into night. Nathan stumbled up his porch steps and shoved the woman inside. Slamming the door behind them, he locked it, bolted it, pushed a heavy chair against it. Then he turned to the woman. She was sobbing, rocking back and forth. He recognized her now. Mrs. Cartwright, the one with the petunias. She was mumbling under her breath over and over, "I should have listened. I should have listened." Nathan sank down against the wall, heart racing. He looked out the window, watched as shadows spilled across the streets like ink, watched as his town was swallowed whole. No one had believed him, no one had prepared, and now it was too late. The house groaned around them. Wood warped, nails creaked in the walls. Nathan pressed his back against the front door, clutching a rusty fireplace poker he'd found in the corner. Mrs. Cartwright huddled on the living room couch, sobbing into her hands. Outside, the world had turned into a nightmare. Screams echoed down the empty streets. The monsters moved swiftly now, like a black tide. Swallowing everything, Nathan had seen one drag Kyle's basketball hoop into a newly formed crack in the earth. Gone. Just like that. The town was falling apart, and the worst part was, he could hear the whispers getting closer. Not outside. Inside. It started as a low hum, barely noticeable, then words slithering through the woodwork. "Nathan, you can't run. You can't hide. We're already here." Nathan clenched the poker tighter. He glanced at Mrs. Cartwright. She hadn't heard the voices yet, or maybe she had, and she was too broken to react. Either way, he was on his own. Again, the whispering grew louder, coming from the walls, the floors, even the ceilings. Nathan stood slowly. The room seemed to tilt around him. The air thickened, heavy with unseen pressure. Something moved in the shadows by the hallway, a flicker of blackness, tall, thin, smiling. Nathan raised the poker and crept forward. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not while he still had people to protect. He reached the hallway entrance, paused, held his breath, listened. Silence. Maybe he'd imagined it. Then a hand shot out of the darkness, fingers long and spindly, like spider legs. Nathan swung the poker, metal connected with bone. The creature screeched, a sound like glass shattering, and reeled back into the shadows. Nathan stumbled backward, heart hammering. The poker shook in his hands. He had hurt it, he could fight it. The realization lit a tiny fire inside him. Hope. Maybe not everything was lost. Maybe they weren't invincible. He turned back toward the living room, just in time to see Mrs. Cartwright being dragged toward the window. The curtains thrashed violently as unseen hands pulled her toward the glass. "No!" Nathan roared. He charged forward, grabbing her waist and yanking back with all his strength. For a terrifying moment it was a tug of war, her body jerking between him and the invisible force. Then, with a final snarl, the thing let go. Mrs. Cartwright collapsed into Nathan's arms, sobbing harder. Nathan slammed the window shut and locked it. Then he backed away, dragging her to the center of the room. The house was under siege, and it was only a matter of time before the monsters got in. Nathan scanned the room. He needed a plan, something to buy time, something to fight back. His gaze fell on the fireplace. An idea sparked. He helped Mrs. Cartwright to her feet. She swayed, glassy-eyed. "Stay here," Nathan said. He sprinted into the kitchen, yanking open drawers, cabinets, anything he could get his hands on. He grabbed a box of matches, a bottle of rubbing alcohol, a roll of duct tape. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Back in the living room, he ripped a curtain off the rod and wrapped it around the poker. He doused it in rubbing alcohol. Then he struck a match and touched it to the cloth. Whoomp! The poker flared to life, a makeshift torch. The flames cast wild shadows across the room, but the walls, they seemed to shrink back from the light. The whispering faltered, momentarily drowned by the crackle of fire. Nathan grinned grimly. He wasn't completely powerless after all. The house shook violently. Picture frames fell from the walls. The front door shuddered against its hinges. Somewhere upstairs, glass shattered. The monsters were getting desperate. They wanted inside. Badly. Nathan helped Mrs. Cartwright to the couch again. "You stay here," he said, "no matter what." She nodded weakly, clutching a decorative pillow like a shield. Nathan prowled the perimeter of the living room, torch held high. Every time a shadow lunged from the wall, he thrust the fire at it. The creatures shrieked and retreated, but they didn't give up. They were probing, testing, looking for weakness. "You can't stop us, Nathan," the walls whispered. "You're just a boy. You're ours." Nathan ignored them, focused on the fire, the heat against his skin, the flickering, dancing light. It was his only weapon now. The assault continued for hours, or maybe it was minutes. Time blurred. All Nathan knew was that he couldn't stop moving. Couldn't. Stop guarding. Every second was a battle, a test of will. Finally, just when he thought he couldn't fight any longer, a new sound cut through the chaos. Bells, soft at first, then louder, clear, pure. Nathan stumbled to the window and peered out. Down the street. Through the swirling smoke and darkness, a figure moved, a man tall and cloaked, carrying a staff with a set of small silver bells tied to the top. Wherever he walked, the monsters recoiled. They hissed and screeched, slithering away from the sound of the bells. The man walked slowly, deliberately, heading straight for Nathan's house. Nathan's knees nearly gave out from relief. Help. Real help. At last. The front door rattled again, but this time it was a knock, a normal knock. 3 sharp raps. Nathan hesitated. He tightened his grip on the burning poker. "Who's there?" he called. The whispering answered, silky and sweet. "Let us in, Nathan." "We're your friends." Nathan gritted his teeth. "No, you're not." Another knock, then a voice, human, warm, strong. "Open the door, boy, quickly." Nathan bolted forward, yanked the chair away, unlatched the locks and threw the door open. The man stepped inside. His cloak swirled around him like smoke. The silver bells chimed softly. Up close, Nathan could see his face, lined and weathered. Eyes like burning coals, kind but fierce. The man raised his staff and waved it once around the room. The whispering ceased. The shadows fled. The walls seemed to exhale. For the first time all night, Nathan felt the house breathe again, alive, safe. The man knelt before him. "You're strong," he said. "Stronger than you know." Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came out, just a dry, rasping sob. The man put a hand on his shoulder. "You've held them back longer than most," he said, "but it's not over yet." Nathan swallowed hard. What are they?" The man's mouth tightened. "They are the first ones," he said. "The ones that lived here before us, before the town, before the world." Nathan shivered. "Can we stop them?" The man smiled sadly. "No, not forever." He stood, and looked toward the burning, broken horizon. "But we can fight." Nathan tightened his grip on the poker. The torch had burned low, but it still flickered stubbornly. He looked around at his ruined house, at Mrs. Cartwright weeping on the couch. The cracked windows, at the blackness seeping through the night outside. He set his jaw. "I'm ready." The man nodded. Together, they stepped outside into the chaos, into the war. The bells chimed, the monsters howled, and Nathan, no longer alone, marched toward the darkness, toward whatever waited beyond the whispering walls, toward the end, or a new beginning. The world outside had changed. Nathan barely recognized his own neighborhood. Where once neat lawns and pastel houses lined the streets, now there were jagged craters, twisted trees, blackened husks of buildings. The sky overhead churned with dark, roiling clouds, lit from within by occasional flashes of blood-red lightning. The monsters slithered through the wreckage like carrion, their forms constantly shifting, arms growing and shrinking, faces appearing and melting away. The ground still trembled faintly, a heartbeat from beneath. Alive, awake, hungry. Nathan clutched the remains of his burning poker, standing at the shoulder of the man in the cloak. The man moved with quiet certainty, staff held high, the silver bells singing with every step. Wherever the sound carried, the monsters shrank back, hissing. But Nathan could feel their anger rising, building into something more dangerous. It was only a matter of time before they stopped fearing the bells, or before something stronger came forward. They passed the ruins of the old library, the playground, the gas station. Nathan's memories clung to these places, birthday parties, bike rides, ice cream runs. Now they were nothing but kindling for the darkness. Nathan stumbled over a loose stone and winced. His body was exhausted, his hands blistered from gripping the poker too tight, his head pounded with every whispered word that still clawed at the edge of his mind. But he kept going. He had to. Finally, they reached the center of town. The old, a war memorial, a wide stone circle ringed by crumbling benches. In the center stood a tall obelisk, cracked but still standing. The man stopped and turned. "This will do," he said. He planted the staff firmly into the cracked stone. The bells gave a single sharp clang that echoed like a gunshot. The monsters shrieked and fled from the edges of the circle, writhing into the shadows. Nathan leaned against the base of the obelisk, panting. He glanced at the man. "You never told me your name." The man smiled thinly. "I am called many things," he said, "but here I am simply the keeper. The keeper of bells." The man inclined his head. "The bells are old magic, a ward against them, against the whisperers." Nathan shivered at the name. It fit too well. "Why now?" Nathan asked. "Why are they coming now?" The keeper's face darkened. "Because the seal was broken." Nathan thought of the trapdoor beneath Mr. Ellis's house, of the monstrous hand clawing upward, of the fire. "It was an accident," he said, his voice small. The keeper looked at him sharply. "An accident, perhaps, but not without consequence." He pointed to the surrounding devastation. "Once the seal is broken, they do not stop. They do not forgive. They will remake this world in their own image, unless we seal it again." Nathan swallowed. "And how do we do that?" The keeper hesitated. "You cannot do it alone," he said. "You need others." Nathan felt a pang. Kyle and Mara were gone, or worse. The sheriff was dead. Most of the town was likely either hiding, taken, or already lost. Who was left? The keeper seemed to read his thoughts. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "And not alone. Not completely." He gestured behind Nathan. Nathan turned and gasped. Out of the darkness, a small group of survivors had gathered at the edge of the circle. Maybe 20 people. Some he recognized. Mara's little brother, clutching a baseball bat, Mrs. Cartwright, still trembling but standing tall. A few other neighbors, dirty and terrified but alive. Nathan's heart surged. He wasn't the only one fighting, not yet. The keeper faced them, his voice ringing out. They are not invincible. They fear the old magics. Fire, iron, faith. We must stand together. Guard the circle. Find the new seal. Nathan stepped forward, lifting his battered poker high. I'll help. One by one, the others followed. They armed themselves with whatever they had. Kitchen knives, crowbars, broken furniture, garden tools. It wasn't much, but it was something. The keeper nodded approvingly. He pointed north. That way, he said. The heart of the old town, where the first well was dug. That is where the breach lies. Nathan nodded grimly. He could already feel it, a pulling sensation deep inside, like a rope tied around his chest, tugging him toward the dark. The keeper raised his staff. The bells chimed again, and the group set off. Nathan led the way, heart hammering. The journey was worse than before. The monsters had grown bolder. They darted toward the group, snapping at the edges of the protective bell song. Nathan swung his poker again and again, fending them off. Mrs. Cartwright screamed as one nearly grabbed her, but Nathan and another boy dragged her back into the circle of protection. Several times, Nathan thought he saw familiar faces in the shadows, neighbors, or friends, but when he looked closer, their eyes were empty, their mouths stretched into horrible silent screams. Taken, gone. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the old well. It sat in a forgotten park, hidden behind the crumbling remains of the first church in town. The well was ancient, built of blackened stones. A rope still dangled into its depths, frayed and mouldy. The air around it was colder, sharper. Wrong. Nathan stepped forward. The keeper held him back. Once you enter, he said quietly, you may not come out. Nathan looked him in the eye. I don't have a choice, do I? The keeper smiled sadly. No. Nathan handed the poker to Mrs. Cartwright. Keep them safe, he said. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Nathan turned, squared his shoulders, and climbed over the low stone lip of the well. He grabbed the rope. It burned his hands, but he didn't let go. He slid down into the darkness. The world closed over his head. The last thing he heard was the chiming of the bells. Fading behind him, the descent was long, longer than it should have been. The walls of the well were rough and slimy. The rope creaked ominously. The air grew colder the deeper he went. Nathan could feel the presence waiting for him below. Vast, ancient, patient. Watching. Finally, his feet touched something solid. He let go of the rope and landed in a narrow tunnel. The floor was damp. The air smelled of rot and old stone. Ahead, a faint blue light flickered. Nathan moved toward it. The tunnel opened into a massive cavern. In the center, a huge stone slab lay cracked and broken. From the cracks seeped a thick, black mist. The whisperers. They poured from the slab like smoke, from a dying fire clawing upward into the world above. Nathan's knees buckled at the sight. It was too big, too much. How could he fight this? How could anyone? But then he remembered Mr. Ellis's voice. It only takes one, Nathan. One light in. The dark. Nathan squared his shoulders. He stepped into the cavern. The whisperers turned toward him, sensing his presence. They surged forward, black tendrils stretching like hungry mouths. Nathan grabbed the lighter from his pocket. He had snatched it from the kitchen earlier, just in case. With trembling fingers, he sparked it to life, a tiny flame, fragile, flickering. The creatures recoiled from the fire, hissing. Nathan stepped closer to the broken slab. He saw now that it wasn't just a crack. It was a door left ajar, a door he needed to close. He knelt beside it. The whispers screamed in his ears. His vision blurred, his skin burned, but he didn't stop. He pressed his hand against the stone. He pushed. The stone shifted. The mist howled. The world shook. Nathan poured everything he had into that one motion, all his fear, his anger, His hope. He thought of his town, his friends, his mother, Mr. Ellis. He thought of every light still left in the dark, and he pushed. The stones slammed shut. The mist was cut off mid-scream. The cavern fell silent. The pressure in the air eased. The rope. Above, Nathan's head shivered, taut again. He had done it. Nathan stumbled back to the rope and began the long, aching climb upward. Above him, the sky was starting to clear. The first stars peeked through the thinning clouds. The bells still chimed, and somewhere, faint but growing stronger, Nathan heard something new. Cheers. Laughter. Life. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. Nathan's hands were raw by the time he pulled himself out of the well. He collapsed onto the cold grass, gasping, feeling every bruise, every cut, every inch of exhaustion crash down on him. The night air tasted different now, crisper, cleaner, no longer clogged with the stink of rot and decay. Above him the stars shone bright and clear. The oppressive clouds had thinned, rolling away to reveal a velvet black sky. He had made it. He had sealed it. Around the park, survivors cautiously stepped closer. Mrs. Cartwright was the first to reach him. She knelt beside him, pressing a trembling hand to his forehead. "He's alive," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He did it." A cheer rippled through the group, small, ragged, but real. Nathan closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he allowed himself to hope. The keeper of bells approached silently, his staff tapping gently against the ground. He looked down at Nathan, his expression unreadable. "You have done something few could ever dream," he said. Nathan struggled to sit up. The keeper offered a hand, and Nathan grasped it, letting the man pull him to his feet. "You said it couldn't be stopped forever," Nathan croaked. The keeper's mouth twisted into a sad smile. "It cannot," he said, "but for now you have bought time, a generation, maybe two." Nathan swallowed. He wanted to be relieved, wanted to celebrate, but some dark part of him knew this wasn't the end. Not truly. They made their way back to the town center. The group moved like ghosts through the broken streets, wary but no longer hunted. The monsters were gone, or at least hiding. The air felt lighter. Nathan carried himself with a quiet pride, even as his legs threatened to buckle under him. The town looked different now, scarred, shattered, but alive, and maybe, just maybe, it could heal. They reached the war memorial again. The keeper stood before the cracked obelisk, raising his staff high. The bells sang a pure, high note that seemed to cleanse the very ground beneath them. Nathan watched as some of the blackened patches on the grass brightened, green shoots pushing upward through the rot. A beginning. A rebirth. The survivors gathered in a loose circle. Mrs. Cartwright, her arm around Mara's little brother, Mr. Dalton the mechanic, holding a battered crowbar like a king's scepter. Even old man Harper, who Nathan was certain had been dead, leaning heavily on a crutch. The town had lost much, but it hadn't lost everything. The keeper lowered his staff. He turned to Nathan. "You have a choice now," he said. Nathan blinked. "A choice?" The keeper nodded. "You can stay here, rebuild, try to live your life." He paused. "Or you can come with me." Nathan's chest tightened. "Where?" The keeper smiled faintly. "There are other breaches," he said, "other whisperers, other wars." He planted the staff before him. "You have proven yourself a fighter, a guardian. If you choose, you can become one of us, a keeper." Nathan's mind raced. Leave. Abandon his town, his friends. The thought cut deep, but so did the idea of staying, of pretending this nightmare hadn't changed him. He wasn't the same boy who had moved in next door to Mr. Ellis. He had seen things, fought things, survived. Maybe he could help others do the same. Maybe that's what Mr. Ellis had been trying to tell him all along. He looked around at the faces of the people he had fought beside. At Mrs. Cartwright, nodding quietly, at Mara's brother, grinning up at him with shy admiration. They would survive without him. They had their own strength now, because of him. Nathan met the keeper's gaze. "I'll go," he said. The keeper bowed his head slightly. "Good." He turned to the others. "This boy saved you all. Remember him." Nathan flushed with embarrassment. He wasn't looking for glory. He just wanted to make sure no one else had to hear those voices again. The keeper reached into his cloak and pulled out a small bundle. He unwrapped it, revealing a slender silver bell, about the size of Nathan's fist. It gleamed in the starlight. The keeper placed it in Nathan's hand. The moment Nathan's fingers closed around it, a deep, resonant hum filled his chest. Warm, powerful. "You are one of us now," the keeper said, a light against the darkness. Nathan nodded. He tucked the bell into his pocket, feeling its reassuring weight against his side. The keeper tapped his staff once against the ground. A ripple of silver light spread outward. When it touched Nathan's feet, the world blurred. The town, the people, the memorial, all faded into mist. Nathan closed his eyes. When he opened them, he stood somewhere else entirely. A vast plain stretched before him. Ruined cities dotted the horizon. Broken towers, crumbling walls. The sky overhead was a bruised purple, swirling with stars and streaks of fire. In the distance, he saw other figures moving, cloaked like the keeper, bearing bells and staffs, warriors, guardians, keepers. The keeper stepped beside him. "Welcome," he said simply. Nathan took a deep breath. The air smelled different here, metallic, sharp, full of unseen things. Danger lurked in every shadow, but so did possibility, hope. He tightened his grip on the silver bell. He wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Together they walked forward into the wasteland, toward the next breach, the next battle, the next whisper, waiting in the dark. Nathan didn't look back. The town healed, slowly, painfully. It stitched itself back together. The survivors cleared. Away the broken homes, rebuilt the roads, replanted gardens where blackened ash once lay. They built new fences, new doors. They painted their walls bright colors and hung wind chimes from their porches. Laughter returned, cautious at first, like a wounded animal creeping into the open. Children played in the parks again. Old men smoked on their front steps, swapping stories that never quite touched the worst nights. Life went on. It always did. In the center of town, the war memorial remained, cracked but standing. Someone, no one knew who, had added a small plaque at its base, simple, unadorned. It read, "Nathan Ellis, Keeper of Bells, the one who remembered." Most folks didn't talk about what had happened. It was easier to pretend it had been a nightmare, a gas leak, a bad storm, something explainable, something normal. Only the oldest among them, Mrs. Cartwright, Mr. Dalton, the sheriff's widow, remembered the truth. They remembered the whispers, the way the world had bent and broken under unseen claws, the monsters that had come in the night, and they remembered the boy who had stood against it all. Sometimes, when the stars were right and the wind blew just so, they swore they could hear a faint chiming, far away, a bell, tolling in the distance, calling, warning, promising. They would smile quietly, grip their coats tighter around themselves, and say a silent prayer for Nathan wherever he had gone. And yet, one house at the far end of town remained empty. Mr. Ellis's house. No one would buy it, no matter how low the price dropped, no matter how many realtors tried to polish. Its image, it sat abandoned, slowly crumbling into the earth. The yard grew wild, the windows cracked, vines clawed up its sides like desperate hands. Some nights, if you dared to walk close enough, you could swear you saw a light flickering in the upstairs window, a shadow pacing, waiting, listening. Local kids dared each other to run up to the front porch and touch the door. Few made it past the gate, even fewer dared to speak of what they heard. If they did, the soft, dry whispering from beneath the floorboards, the low, patient scratching, the quiet click, 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 like long nails tapping against wood. Waiting. One October evening, just as the leaves turned to fire and gold, Mara's little brother, now older, bolder, decided he wasn't afraid anymore. He slipped through the broken gate, flashlight clenched tight in his sweaty hand. The porch creaked under his sneakers. The door, once sturdy and oak-strong, now hung slightly ajar. Inside, darkness reigned. Stale air, heavy and still, pressed against him, but he stepped inside anyway. The house smelled of mildew and old paper. The remnants of Mr. Ellis's life lay scattered. Overturned chairs, faded photographs, rotted curtains swaying in the draught. The trapdoor Nathan had once discovered in the kitchen remained, closed, chained now, padlocked, rusty but intact. He approached it slowly, drawn by a tug he didn't understand. A whisper in his mind, so soft he almost thought it was his own imagination. Come closer, remember, forget. His fingers brushed the heavy lock. It burned cold against his skin. The chain rattled faintly, though he hadn't moved it. The boy's flashlight flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging him into darkness. For a long, breathless moment, he stood frozen, listening. The house was not silent. Not anymore. Something moved beneath him, something that should not be, something ancient, patient, hungry. The boy turned, ran, burst out of the house without looking back. He didn't stop running until he reached the safety of the main road, gasping for breath under the cold, starless sky. He didn't tell anyone what he had seen, what he had heard. The townspeople saw his pale face and knew without asking. They simply closed their windows a little tighter that night, bolted their doors, huddled around their fireplaces, and whispered prayers to gods they barely remembered, because they understood something now. Something Nathan had once known too well, something Mr. Ellis had tried and failed to teach. The seal had been closed, but not forever. The whisperers were patient. They had all the time in the world, and one day, when the stars aligned once more, when the bells fell silent and the guardians grew weak, they would rise again, from beneath the floorboards, from behind the midnight doors, from the empty houses at the end of forgotten streets. They would return, and next time, Nathan might not be there to save them.